Sorry, I have to start again as I see that this session, I jumped the gun. Hello, everyone. This is Siobhán Wills from the Transitional Justice Institute, and I'm very delighted to welcome you all to this reading of Ballymurphy Poems by Eilish Rooney. Just to let you know that the session is being recorded and it's being broadcast on Facebook. When it comes to the chat function, you're very welcome to put your questions. When it comes to the Q&A, you're very welcome to put your questions in the chat function. And it may be possible, depending how things are going, to be able to put you on so that we can see you on when it comes to the questions. So moving on to the session. Eilish is Scholar Emeritus at the University's Transitional Justice Institute. Her office used to be just down the hall from mine, and she was a great colleague, so it's lovely to welcome her back to read her poems reflecting on the Ballymurphy Massacre inquests and her family pen portraits of victims. I'm also delighted to welcome the members of the Ballymurphy families, Ciaran O'Cruadhlaoic, Irene Leckie, Kathleen McCarry, and Rita Bonner, who will read the sonnets Eilish has written about their relatives who were killed in the massacre. The Ballymurphy Massacre took place between the 9th and 11th of September 1971. 10 people were shot and killed by members of the 1st Battalion of the Parachute Regiment of the British Army. Another was assaulted and a gun was put in his mouth. He died from a heart attack. At the time, the army claimed that the victims were gunmen. The families campaigned for decades for an inquest, and eventually, nearly 40 years later, an inquest opened in November 2018. In May 2021, the coroner delivered her verdict. But none of the killings were justified, none of the victims were members of any armed group, and none of the victims had been involved in any criminal activity. Their families, their lawyers, and many human rights activists are now campaigning against the Westminster government's recent legislation that would grant amnesty for any crimes committed in the context of the conflict because it prevents the prosecution of the perpetrators. Eilish grew up in Ballymurphy. She attended the inquest, listened to the victims' testimonies, and to the coroner's questioning of witnesses. Her poems are a reflection on some of the experiences that she saw the families going through. I've read the poems and I find them deeply moving. The collection is in 2 parts. The poems in part 1 capture incidents and moments in the process of the inquest that reflect on what happened, how it was portrayed at the time, and the information that came out from the inquest. The poems in part 2 of the collection are sonnets in memory of the 11 victims. Today, Eilish will read some of the poems. Then Ciaran O'Cruadhlaoic will read the poem about his uncle, Frank Quinn. Irene Leckie will read the poem about her mother, Joan Connolly. Kathleen McCarry will read the poem about her brother, Eddie Doherty. Rita Bonner will read the poem about her brother, John Laverty. Thank you all. I'm now going to pass over to Eilish to read her poems.
Eilish, you're on mute.
This always happens to me. Thank you very much, Siobhán, for a fine introduction to us all. Can I just say that Briege Voyle will be reading her poem for her mother. I just get started into the poems. The first poem I'm going to read is the first poem in the collection, and it's called Internment. And I begin with a quotation from James V. Burke, who wrote Demetrius Lives On in Ireland in the New York Times in March 1983. So I begin with a quotation from him. The poem is called, as I say, Internment. Some long forgotten military planner called it Operation Demetrius in honor of the warrior king of Macedonia, who, it was said, conquered but never ruled. In Laganside Courthouse, Courtroom 12, military witnesses often refer to Operation Demetrius. Families facing them look and listen. They have waited a long time to see and hear the men in charge tell what happened that day and why. Who ordered the shooting? In their evidence, the long forgotten military planner is called to mind and forgotten in one and the same breath. Much as the river is remembered at the courthouse, far from its ancient origins, Eon an Legan, far as Ballymurphy is from Macedonia, where Demetrius made a name for himself. The next poem I'm going to read is called Waste Ground. And following that, Ciaran O'Cruadhlaoic is going to read the poem of his uncle, Frank Quinn, who was killed in this incident. Waste Ground. 1. Spare men. A witness at the inquest today spoke about spare men in the attachment sent to Springmartin. They weren't all members of 2 Para support company anti-tank platoon who were there that day. But the witness said they were all parachute regiment trained. He was one of them. 2. Brick. 5 months later in Derry, an attachment of 1 Para support company entered Glenfadda Park, not spare men, but a brick covering for each other. One was a crack shot with Ballymurphy experience, Saville was told in London. 4 men lay dead. 3. High ground. The attachment gets to the high ground the smart way from the mountain, ahead of Queen's regiment. 2 remain with the vehicle. The others head to the flats, overlooking the waste ground and the action. They take some rounds and use some. Frank Quinn, Father Hugh Mullen, lost lives. 4. The stand. The man on the stand today gave the order, watch and shoot, to men whose names he no longer recalls. One may have been a crack shot. Another was later blown up by an IRA landmine. The witness fired 7 rounds. Another soldier, he says, fired 1, at gunmen only. Yes, they talk at regimental reunions about the Falklands, never Ballymurphy. Can I let you know that a reader of this poem is asked to look at notes at the back of the poetry book, where they will learn that a brick is a military term for a 4-man defence team. The 4 men who lay dead in Derry were Gerard Doherty, Gerald McKinney, William McKinney, and James Ray. The soldier who was blown up was Corporal Stephen Harrison, near Newton Hamilton in April 1973. And a military witness at the inquest said that 87 rounds of ammunition were recovered from the flats. If I can hand over now to Ciaran.
Hello there. How you doing? My name is Ciaran O'Cruadhlaoic. I'm a nephew of Frank Quinn. We lived across town. When my mother heard about a priest and a man shot dead in Ballymurphy, someone will have a sore heart tomorrow, she said. Little did she know that it was our Frank in the field. He went to help Father Mullen. The news reported that gunmen were fired at. Some believed the story. They shunned our grief. Decent neighbours wanted us to stay. The best brother anyone could wish for. He loved his wife Anne, daughter Angela, and was looking forward to another child. Francis was born fatherless. Their sore hearts never mended. We waited a long time to hear the words said, the truth told, innocent.
Thank you, Ciaran. The next poem is Mance Field. 1. Look. A family member sitting in the jury box, as families do during the inquest, looks at the wall, not at the man facing her in the witness box giving evidence. Nor does she distract herself by reading documents or taking notes, as some do, to ease the effort of witnessing whitewash. She looks at the wall as though the wall looked back. 2. Soccer. In the public gallery, behind a wall of glass and an empty dock, Valentine's Day sweets are passed around. Clove Rock, love hearts, forever, kiss me, meant to be, truth and lies. Then chocolate eclairs, crackly paper. And a silence as everyone looks up to see black and white maps on screen. Springhill Road, Henry Taggart, the Mance Field. Before and after Ballymurphy's landscape of loss. 3. Aside. 24 officials in the well of the court sit with screens, mics, papers, a wooden lectern in place. Some whisper, others come and go carrying fat folders. Did you order bodies to be recovered from the Mance Field? The answer comes quick and clear. No, I did not. Who did? The QC looks at Milady. The witness, erect and certain, says nothing. People stumble and fall, call for help, cry out. Those who died after being shot in the Mance Field were Noel Phillips, aged 19, one of 8 children. Joan Connolly, aged 44, mother of 8 children. Joseph Murphy, 41, father of 12 children. Daniel Taggart, 44, father of 13 children. I'll hand over to Briege Voyle.
Thank you. I just get myself organised. She looked at us at the Henry Taggart. I caught sight of her before the tear gas. She asked about what we didn't come home. My daddy had put mattresses on the floor for us to be together without her. He used Mr. Heyman's phone that morning. Yes, a red-headed woman had been admitted, but she was in the morgue. He came back broken. Some were sent south to his family in a refugee camp. My sisters heard Joan Connolly, mother of 8, was buried today. No one told us. We grieved first, and they then struggled to survive. Now we campaign for justice and innocence.
Thank you, Briege. The next poem is called Systemic. I was gentle with the bodies brought into the Henry Taggart that time. No one noticed, but I was, all the same, gentle. I wasn't the only one. A few of us held back, kept busy here and there, didn't join in. We saw each other. We said nothing. The next poem is White Rock Road. 1. Orders. The sapper driving a digger up the White Rock Road wears a red beret to look like the paras in the pig coming behind. They are under orders to dismantle the barricades in West Belfast. It is day 2 of internment in Ballymurphy. 2. Search. 5 lives are lost. 1 family search for their father, last seen in the Mance Field. The place is in an uproar. Rumours are rife. Those who can get the children out. 1 man sends his wife and 4 kids away to stay somewhere in the country. 3. Shooting. She will return to the West, a widow, after the shooting at the barricade, where the sapper opens fire. He is the only soldier at the inquest to say he killed a man, perhaps by accident. 4. Jury. The family in the jury box face a man who was a sapper in Belfast almost 50 years ago, driving a digger in a red beret, removing barricades, making way for paras under orders, making widows and orphans in Ballymurphy. Eddie Doherty, age 31, and the father of 4 children, lost his life that day. If I can hand over to Kathleen McCarry, Eddie's sister.
Right, Kathleen,
Kathleen, you're on mute. Sorry.
Have to speak. God. And you make messes.
You're okay, Kathleen. Start again, please. Start the poem again. We can hear you now.
I can't see you, but what do you do?
Just
Back
read the
straight.
poem, please.
Just speak.
Yes.
All right, love. I'm Kathleen McCarry, the youngest sister of Eddie Doherty. Eddie was the 4th of 6 children. He and Mary had 4 themselves when the soldier shot him. A pioneer, confraternity man, blood donor, and a great worker. That was our Eddie. They said he was a petrol bomber after they killed him. In the paper, he was named as gunman Eamon Doherty, whose body was dumped on the White Rock Road. All lies. May God forgive them. I don't. The bullet that killed Eddie wrecked us all. His wife and my mother died broken-hearted. The verdict is clear. My innocent brother. Eddie was deprived of his life, and so were we. Can you hear me?
Thank you very much, Kathleen.
You're welcome. Sorry about that.
No worries. The next poem is Mountain Loney. 2 men were gunned down that morning on the Mountain Loney. Unarmed, shot from behind, the evening news reports from the inquest. Headlines in the Belfast Telegraph on the day repeated word for word, an army briefing its own cover-up. 2 gunmen shot dead in a 2-hour battle in Ballymurphy. As one family search for a father, the other identify a son. The 2 people who lost their lives were John Laverty, aged 20, one of 11 children, and Joseph Corr, aged 43, the father of 7 children. Rita Bonner is going to read John Laverty's poem.
On Laverty, the 3rd of April, 1951 to the 11th of August, 1971. When he was 15, John kept pigeons. He bought a humming pigeon from a man down the falls. When he let the pigeon go, he and Terry stayed up all night looking for it from the bedroom window, waiting. But the pigeon never returned. Not until the next day, when the man who sold it brought it back to Ballymurphy. That night, the pigeon safe, they went to bed happy. When John was shot dead, Terry went missing, arrested for riotous behaviour. He did 6 months. 44 years later, he had his convictions overturned and made our journey to justice stronger. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rita. I'm about to read the last poem. It's a long poem, so have patience. It's called Dignity. In March 2019, Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Karen Bradley, said in the House of Commons that British soldiers who had killed people in Northern Ireland had acted in a dignified and appropriate way. She did not intend to cause offence. The Ballymurphy inquest was ongoing at the time. 1. War is a cruel, bloody business. Youths from workless streets in Cardiff and Glasgow, from miners' families in Yorkshire, lads from London's East End, recruited, trained, run off their feet, disciplined to overcome the human aversion to causing the death of another, taught to kill with a rule book and yellow card in Belfast and Derry to begin with. Boots on the ground in Ballymurphy and the Bogside, then everywhere needed or sent. Technically though, never to war. No land lost to the enemy, even if Armagh meant high forts and heliports. 2. Caesar was assert with the Gauls. Untrammeled by Geneva Conventions, neither human rights nor scruples, no truth-telling witnesses, facts fixed on the ground and the victor's page. Like empires everywhere, the sun sets in words of disavowal. 3. No one knew among the spare men, no one knew in the squad, no one knew in the platoon, no one knew in the company, no one knew in the Henry Taggart, no one knew in Paisley Park, no one knew in the battalion, not one officer knew. No one knew at Command HQ, no one knew in the MOD, no one knew in Stormont, no one knew in Westminster, not one politician who requested troops knew. 4. Francis Quinn had a right to life. Father Hugh Mullen had a right to life. Noel Phillips had a right to life. Joan Connolly had a right to life. Daniel Taggart had a right to life. Joseph Murphy had a right to life. Eddie Doherty had a right to life. John Laverty had a right to life. Joseph Corr had a right to life. John James McCurr had a right to life. Injured Pat McCarthy his heart gave out. 5. No one knew who killed the people in Ballymurphy. No witness for the defence knew, bar a singular sapper in a red beret who might have killed a man. 6. British Army officials spoke to the press and said that the dead were all armed, that the priest and the man he went to bless were gunmen caught in the act. Another, knowing the inside story, talked to a keen media, certain that the coverage would carry facts for people north and south, heard over breakfast and confirmed by the evening news. What many suspected, they didn't get it for nothing. 7. Ballymurphy, true to form, nothing to lose and less to worry about in August 1971. The best public housing money could buy in post-war Belfast. And what do? Run riot, arm their priests, bring us all down. Amen. In March 2020, the British government introduced a bill to set a 5-year time limit on prosecutions for members of the UK armed forces who have served overseas. The Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Brandon Lewis, said that the government proposes to ensure equal treatment for Northern Ireland veterans. Thank you, Siobhán. That's the end of the readings.
Thank you, Eilish, and thank you all of you who read the poems of your relatives. Sorry, I'll speak a bit louder. I realise my voice is quite low because that's very emotional readings. So thank you, Eilish, and all of you who read your poems about the relatives who were killed. It's difficult to know what to ask about such a painful and difficult period and time, ongoingly difficult because of the length of time it's taken to have an inquest and the ongoing difficulty of the block on securing any justice because of the Westminster legislation. But my first question, Eilish, about your poems, what did it mean for you, the process of writing? How has it changed you? Has it changed you in any way? And what does it mean for the relatives of the victims, these poems? Sound.
And I have to keep doing this, I'm sorry. Thank you. Something that struck me whenever I attended the inquest, and I attended the inquest for a fraction of days compared to Ciaran O'Cruadhlaoic, who's here and was coordinator. He's from Springhill Community House, and he is friend and coordinator of Ballymurphy Families, who was there every day and sent out every day a message of what had occurred at that day's hearing of the inquest. I'll get to your question now, but I just want people to have some background about what it was like to attend the inquest. It was a remarkable experience, and in some ways for an unusual reason, you might think when I tell you. I'd been to the courthouse over years on a number of occasions and attended as part of a cutaway audience, if you like. Everything that happens in a courthouse happens in the well of the court and is in the charge of the well of the court and the judge. The Ballymurphy inquest, it struck me the very first time I went down, was that the whole court was set up almost in reverse. The families, it seemed to me, had taken over in some significant ways the running of the inquest. it really was a remarkable experience. So whilst those poems are very hard to listen to and they deal with awful loss, the experience of attending the inquest was also an empowering experience, I think, for the families. It certainly was for me to see families, if you like, in charge of the process, it seemed. So for people others who have lost loved ones, and who are looking towards inquests, I would say that as an encouragement. The way it has changed me, Siobhán, is very difficult to say. I started writing the poems after the inquest hearings were finished, and when I was looking over notes that I had taken as I was sitting in the court, and writing notes as a way to manage the emotions that would arise in the course of listening and watching what was happening. So in some ways, writing the poems was a resolution of an upsurge of experiences and observations that occurred during that time. But it was also, I hoped, a tribute to people who have suffered loss in the course of the conflict. These were 11 families. We know that there are thousands of families. And in some way, I attempted to pay respect to lost lives. And I frequently mention lost lives in the course of the famous David McKittrick and co-authors' record of lost lives in the conflict. I didn't ask families permission to write the poems. At no point in the course of writing the poems did I check with people that it was okay to write them. I initially envisaged that a little booklet would be published and handed round to families at the 50th anniversary. And I coordinated with Ciaran around that. And whenever the complete collection was written, he and other colleagues, including Briege Voyle, the poet, encouraged me to have the poems printed.
Ron, you're on mute.
Yes, I put myself on mute so as not to disrupt Eilish, and then I couldn't find the button to come back again. Thank you, Eilish, for that moving and also important explanation that the process of the inquest was empowering as well as distressing. I think it's time for me to open up the Q&A to anyone, both on the panel or anyone who is attending here to ask a question. You can ask a question in the chat, or Rory has control of the controls.
Yes, so maybe if people want to put questions into the chat, we can read those out. If people want to put questions into the chat, we can read those out. Or if people want to use the raise hand function to indicate they would like to speak and turn on their video, I can do that as well. So very happy to take questions either from panelists or from members of the audience, the attendees. Either put up your hand if you want to speak and have your video, or put something in the chat box.
Hi, Eilish.
While people are thinking.
Yes.
Can I ask our readers what it was like for them to read their poem? Ciaran, if you could start and say something about the poem, if you like.
Don't know, I suppose just speaking on the poems altogether, having read the findings, you know, and being at the court, have missed perhaps a handful of days I missed. I was there all the time. And it's very, obviously, just legal speak and all the rest of it is very formal. But to read, having gone through that experience and then to read what you put in the poems, it just, because it was a very, very, you know, traumatizing experience and sort of had a heavy effect on you. I haven't come through just hearing what your family had come through, and then to go to the legal, and then to see this piece of art, you know, it summed up everything, you know, and it was very special. So thank you, Coromina Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you, Ciaran. Is there anyone of the other people here who read Eilish's poems about their relatives who want to say anything? Hi, Briege. Hi.
Rita?
Rita, sorry.
Rita, you're okay. I would just like to say that the poem to me reflected how patient my brother John was. It reflected how close him and Terry were as brothers as they waited up all night. It shows the funny side to him as well. He was a quiet, big gentleman, but at home he played jokes. So that to me, it just brought out some of his character. It also told of the experience of Terry being missing. The fact that my parents were out searching for him. It sums up a lot in so many lines. The poem to me is special. And to me, it was wrote from the heart. And I would like to thank Eilish. It's just, I just love it. And it also reflects on Terry doing 6 months imprisonment, but also it'd been overturned and Terry been declared innocent. You know, it's just, all those lines just resonate with me and my family, and I just like to thank her. Thank you, Eilish. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Rita. It is a beautiful poem. I'm glad, Eilish, that there is a poem there. It's only a poem, but it's a memory. So yes. There is any, before I move on to looking at the chat here, is any one of the, on the panel of the relatives want to speak before I move on to read what is coming up on the chat here?
I would like to speak to Eilish personally.
Hi.
And thank her, because to me the poem just hits home to what the person my brother was. I find it very emotional, and every time I look at it, there's more emotions come back. As for the court, it was horrendous when you had to face the people in the courtroom, especially the day we met the soldier. I wasn't going to meet him, and then I thought my younger brother was on his own, and I thought, no, I can't do that in him, and I will go in. And it was very, very hard to look at this man who, with a shot, just destroyed our lives.
Yeah. My
mother's life, Eddie's wife's life, and the children who never knew their father. But at the end of the day, we can't stop what's happened, and we have to get on with it. But I want to thank Eilish, because I seen her in the court many a day, and she was a lovely person even to speak to. But for to do that for us, I thought it was very thoughtful of her, and very thoughtful in the way she put out each poem.
Mm-hmm.
Eilish, thank you so much from the Doherty family. We really appreciate what you've done. And I am still getting the books for all my relations and handing them out. So thank you so much. I really appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you. And Eilish.
Siobhán, Joanna's on video now, if Joanna wanted to say anything.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I actually came to the church to listen to Eilish reading and the families reading the first, for the first time, and bought a copy of the book. And it's interesting having, that was an extraordinary event, but even reading them and now listening to them again is even more powerful in some ways. It's just the emotion of the Eilish, your poems and of the families. And I wonder if you would say something a little bit about when you wrote the sonnets, about using the notes you took in the court of what people talked about their families and how you went about doing that.
Surely, Joanna, people did pen portraits of their families, and these pen portraits of their loved ones, and these pen portraits were submitted in the court. Ciaran can say something about that in just a moment, but I was given access by him to the portraits that people had written about their loved one. And I used the language or the memories or the important things that were said about a person in writing the sonnets. I also, of course, left out lots of what a person said about their loved one. Loads of what they said about their loved one was left out. But as I started to write those poems, the poems assumed different shapes. It happens whenever you're trying to write a poem, I think, and an idea triggers or some set of words come to you and you begin writing the poem. So the poems took different shape and became poems of different lengths. Some poems were quite long and some poems were quite short, just according to how the poems worked in my imagination and creative urge. And then I decided that maybe that wasn't such a good idea to have different poems of different lengths for different people. Some people might start counting the lines and saying, my relative only got 10 lines and somebody else got 15. I know that sounds silly at the moment of our reading and the seriousness of the thing. But I decided then that what I would do is, the sonnet is an English and Italian form that has great, provenance. So I decided, I'll do sonnets. I didn't stick to the rules of sonnet making, and I've called these Ballymurphy sonnets because we break all the rules except we keep to 14 lines and more or less iambic pentameter throughout. So I'm smiling at that because I also want to encourage people to, if possible, use their creativity in writing about experiences that are tough, because sometimes the process of using your creativity gathers from the difficult experience something very precious and important, and captures something that doesn't belong to you anymore. It belongs out in the world, if you like, as a testimonial to an experience, to a person, to their life, and to what was said about them and how much they were valued. Ciaran, could I ask you just a second? Sorry, Joanna, you wanted to come back.
No, only just to say thank you. That's, I appreciate your explanation, and also to say, I think that I feel very grateful to you for giving me and anybody reading the poems an insight and empathy and feeling, more closer to the families. And because obviously over the years, I know how horrible it's been, terrible it's been for people. But at the same time, your poems give me certainly a sense of a wider sharing of that experience of the inquest. So thank you.
Eilish?
I was just going to come in to say, yes, I would ask Ciaran, would he say something about the availability of the poetry books, if he can?
Sure. I just wanted to say just about the process of the pen portraits for families. It's all the campaign for 50 years is about getting just, truth and justice. And the narrative has always been that their loved ones were gunmen or gunwomen. And with families, it was very important that they got the story about the human side of the people that were killed or murdered during the massacre. And there was a lot of preparation in advance to the inquests, not only, you know, court visits allowing families to see how court operates, and, you know, residentials about speaking about terminology and what you might expect to hear and who my lady is and who my lord is and all of that. But it was very important that families be given an opportunity within that process to tell the court and the wider public about who their loved one was. So that took quite a while before the inquest even started. Those pen portraits were formed from interviews with families, and then they were drafted up by families. Then they had to go to their legal representatives to ensure, you know, that stuff was accurate and, you know, that they weren't speaking outside of what they should say. And then they were given the opportunity in the first 5 or 6 days of the inquest to address the court. And one of the families said it was like the wake they never had, because some families, you know, were away during, you know, the aftermath. So they weren't there for the burial of their loved one. Briege Voyle and her sisters, as she said in her poem, heard of that when they were in a refugee camp from an RTE radio news broadcast. So it was the first opportunity they had to speak about that. And after each reading, or, you know, family member who gave their pen portrait, the judge, you know, stopped proceedings, and all of the other families would gather outside and you know, reassure and greet the person that had just, you know, been through a difficult time of reading that pen portrait. So it was a long process, but it was an opportunity for families for the first time to put on record, you know, who their loved one was. And Eilish will know some of them are quite lengthy. And if you get an opportunity, you can, you know, get those through the court and read them on record. The other question was about availability of the books. Eilish has very kindly produced the booklets herself, and there is no cost or no charge because Eilish has covered that. But what we do ask is for a donation towards the Ballymurphy Massacre Memorial Garden, which is in the process of being built. The books are available through Springhill Community House, and we can get an email out if Rory, if anybody wants that, Rory can pass that on. And they're also available in the art bookshop on the Falls Road and Cultureland on the Falls Road as well. If anybody wants to get them, you're welcome to give us a call and get them that way.
Thank you, Ciaran. Eilish, if I may, there's a few comments I'd like to read out, and then Fidelma wanted to say something. I'll just read out some comments from Julianne Campbell, who's one of our PhD researchers. I just wanted to say congratulations on a powerful body of work, brilliantly read today. I look forward to finding and reading the full book from Julianne in Derry. And then from Julia Canny, not a question, but just a sentiment of huge gratitude to Eilish for these poems and to the family members for speaking today and sharing these pieces of their loved ones with us. Absolutely brilliant. Anya says, wonderful work, Eilish. Great reading from all the participants too. Danielle Gallagher, another one of our PhD researchers. Like Siobhán, I find it hard to respond with a question, so this is just a comment. The work you have produced, Eilish, is so powerful and a true testament to the lives that were taken and those that have had to live with that, as well as the inquest process. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for sharing the poetry with the world. I'd also like to thank the relatives for coming along and sharing their experiences, both personally and through reading their poems. Your continued witness of what happened to your loved ones is beyond powerful, though I'm sure it comes at deep personal cost. Thank you all, and my copy is in the post, and I shall be sharing the words. We have quite a few other messages, but maybe to break it up, we'll let Fidelma speak, and then we'll go back to the remaining messages. Fidelma, do you want to just, yes, thank you.
I just want to echo what everyone else is saying. I find the reading immensely emotional. Like Joanna, I find that it brought me really closer to the events, to the processes that followed, and to the pain that people had suffered and continue to suffer. And all of you for sharing those poems today with us. I find them very delicately put together and absolutely a beautiful collection. So thanks so much.
While other people are gathering their questions, I'll just finish reading the comments that we have from Millie Light, one of our PhD researchers again. Thank you. This has been so touching and thought-provoking. The power of poetry to hold something like this, the pain, anger, injustice, and honoring of all those who died and their families. Professor Aoife O'Donoghue from Durham University writes that this has been a very moving experience to hear you all read, and thanks to Eilish and family members for sharing their lives and poetry with us. Neil Hartley, who's doing a PhD with us. Hi all. I thought the poems were very powerful and the presentation of the readings were excellent. I found it interesting that the readings linked the inquest with memories of lost relatives. I would like to ask if the inquest is now a central part of the memories surrounding Ballymurphy, thanks to Eilish and all the readers. Eilish Thompson, the families have done themselves proud, and our credit to Ballymurphy. Thank you, Eilish. There is a question there from Mihal. I would like to ask if the inquest is now a central part of memory surrounding Ballymurphy. I don't know, Eilish, if you or one of the family want to take that. You're on mute, Eilish.
Family member or Ciaran, would you like to take that? Is the inquest now a central part of memory surrounding Ballymurphy? Rita?
Sorry, I can't speak for families, maybe they'll contribute, but certainly the verdict is, you know, I mean, after 50 years to have a verdict of entirely innocent, you know, that will certainly live on in the memory of anybody who has been, you know, part of the Ballymurphy campaign and story, and wider community, because I know we talk about the victims of, you know, what happened and their family members here, but this was you know, this affected the whole of the community. So not only did families have their day and get that verdict, but that rippled out into the community as well. And they responded by greeting families when they returned on the 11th of May into Ballymurphy. And, you know, they were out at their doors, and because of COVID, we couldn't have a gathering, which would have been the plan before. But families came to the door in Ballymurphy and they banged their pots and pans, and, you know, as cars drove in the street. So it will certainly the verdict. The actual inquest was a harrowing experience and re-traumatizing experience. And I would say it would be a very difficult memory for families to, lots of people for different reasons tend not to hold on to those memories and block them out, you know, as a mechanism to, you know, survive the whole thing. So, you know, from my point of view, certainly the outcome will be a memory that will be there for, you know, the rest of my life.
I'd just like to reinforce what Ciaran has said. The verdict went out that day, but it went out to the people of Ballymurphy and the wider community, and in actual fact the whole world. That day in the court, for the verdict. The process beforehand, when I was going into court, it was like you're in a time warp. I was 14 again. I was back in 1971. Then as you came out of the court, it was like the time warp, you had to go back to your home. You had to start functioning as a mother, the wife, the granny, all that taken into account. You know, I remember one of the photographers outside saying I was running a bit late, and I said I was late getting out of work for the wee breakfast club that I was doing. And he said, you know, we don't think of those things before you get to court or after you come out of court. On the day of the verdict, I was still in shock. My community that evening brought me back to the happiness when I seen the community coming out in support and thanking us. It was unreal. It's a memory that will last till the day I die. I've lost us, I think.
No.
I think you've just reduced us to silence, Rita. Thank you. There are two more comments. Ralph Wesman writing from Tasmania, a powerful presentation, who says that poetry has no effect. And Seaneen Little writes, thank you for sharing and reading these poems today. They are very powerful. The poems are a true example of the significance of the arts in exploring our painful past in the North. Those are all of our comments, and as we are coming to the end of the hour, so Siobhán, I'm going to hand back to you to close as you see fit. And turn on your mic.
The mic. Thank you all. Thank you, Eilish. And thank you all of the relatives who have come and spoken. And thank you to all the people who came in to listen. I found this a very moving experience of sharing memory and the pictures that Eilish portrayed of the victims and that was read out by their families. I just like to thank you all, and yes, I have a copy of the book, and I will be reading it again, and I would suggest to people to get a copy. And thank you. I think I'd better say goodbye to you all. And before I do, maybe Rory wants to say goodbye too. Thank you.
Well, yes, let me just echo my thanks to Eilish and members of the families. I think it's clear you've made a great impact on the attendees today, and Siobhán and myself include us in that. So thank you very much for this, and thank you to Eilish for showing the potential of art and poetry to deal with the issues and discussion. Eilish has been, as Siobhán said at the beginning, a wonderful colleague over many years, and I'm delighted that we can continue our work together, Eilish. So thank you, and thank you to everyone else who's spoken today. Ciaran referred to how you can get copies of the booklet and how if you wish you can make a donation. So Ciaran, if you just send me those details, I'll make sure that they go to all of the attendees. And do keep an eye on our YouTube channel for TJI. We will make the video available in due course as well. And so thank you very much, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.